Hello, this is Chef John from foodwishes.com with chocolate croissants. That's right, remember that time we made croissants, but we saved half the dough so we can make something else later? Well, these chocolate croissants are something else. And are they ever? I mean, I've been quoted as saying there is absolutely nothing better than a homemade croissant, but these come very, very close. And the good news is they're actually pretty easy to make, as long as you don't care too much about how perfect looking they are, which is something I very deeply care about not caring about. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. And what I have here is my thawed, but still very cold, half batch of croissant dough. And what we'll do using just a little bit of flour is press and roll this out into a rectangle that's going to hopefully be about 1/8 of an inch thick. And yes, I'm using the term rectangle very loosely, since I'm pretty sure there's no word to describe the shape I ended up with. But nevertheless, it was kind of rectangle-ish. And more importantly, was rolled out to my desired thickness. And then once that's been accomplished, we'll go ahead and take a knife, or this pizza cutter if you prefer, and attempt to cut these into 6 relatively evenly sized pieces. And if you're thinking at this point, wouldn't that have been easier if you had actually rolled this out into a rectangle? Well, yes it would, but I didn't. And as you'll see, that's not actually going to cause any real problems. But anyway, I'm going to portion my dough into 6 pieces, and then I'll go ahead and take the most even one and show you how to form your chocolate croissant. And the first step for that would be to kind of pull and stretch the dough on one end here, just a little bit so we end up with sort of tapered ends. And then once that's happened, we're going to go ahead and apply a couple tablespoons of chopped chocolate or chocolate chips, but in 2 different spots. All right, the first about 1 inch or so from the edge, and then the second one about 1 inch or 2 away. And I really do recommend using a dark, bittersweet chocolate here, and I'll talk about why a little bit later. But anyway, once our dough's been chocolated, we'll go ahead and roll this up. Not too tightly, but not loose either. And as usual, we'll attempt to end up with the seam somewhere on the bottom. And that's it. We've just formed our first chocolate croissant. And have 5 more to do. And since I started with a perfect piece, let me use one of those screwed up end pieces for this second one. So after giving one end a little bit of a stretch, we will apply our chocolate in 2 places separated by a couple inches. And the reason for that is when we roll this up, we want a little bit of dough in between that chocolate. And by the way, while chips will work here, these just seem to come out better if you use hand-chopped chocolate. I can't explain why, and neither can the scientists. Probably because nobody asked them, but still. And if you want, as you roll this up, you can put a little bit of an egg wash at the end to keep that stuck together. But if you end up with that seam on the bottom, it really shouldn't matter. But suit yourself. And then speaking of egg wash, once these have been stuffed and rolled and transferred onto a Silpat line baking sheet, we'll go ahead and brush those with an egg that's been beaten with a tablespoon of water. And when you finish this step, don't throw away the egg wash, because we are going to give these a second coating after the proofing. So what we'll want to do after these are egg washed is let them sit in a warm spot for about 1 hour to 1.5 hours, or until they look a little something like this. And I'm not sure if they're actually going to double in size during the proofing, but they should puff up noticeably. And then assuming that's happened, we'll go ahead and apply the second egg wash before we bake these, as well as sprinkling over one optional ingredient, and that would be some coarse sea salt, which I think looks and tastes great. But like I said, up to you. You are, after all, the Gus Van Sant of your chocolate croissant. So skip that if you want, but I do recommend it. And then once that's set, these are finally ready to bake. So let's go ahead and transfer those into the center of a 400-degree oven for about 25 minutes or so, or until they are beautifully browned and look like this, which I would describe as gorgeous and enticing. But before I continue on complimenting myself, let me point out one thing. This is what happens if your seam is not on the bottom and too close to the edge. It will kind of spring open and have kind of a funky shape, versus this one where the seam did end up on the bottom, and to most people would be considered better looking. So just a little bit of a teaching moment. And now I can get back to bragging how great these look, as I transfer them onto a rack to cool, which is sometimes optional, but not this time. All right, we will not serve a chocolate croissant while it's still warm, since to get the full effect, the chocolate has to return to its solid state. So I went ahead and let mine cool for about 1 hour, which seemed like about 3 days, before transferring those in this towel-lined basket. And one of the reasons it doesn't bother me that these are all different sizes and shapes is because my guests are all different sizes and shapes. So we got that going for us, which is nice. But anyway, I went ahead and took a few pictures, at which point it was time to try one. And while I didn't do a fork scrape, I hope you'll settle for a serrated knife slice. Oh yeah, that sounds good. And as we gaze upon this cross-section, you may be thinking to yourself, that is not enough chocolate. Well, with all due respect, you could not be more wrong. All right, don't forget that croissant dough is rich and buttery and flaky and delicious. So we're just looking for a little touch of bittersweet chocolate to accentuate that and not overpower it. All right, we're not trying to create some kind of chocolate donut here. This is actually supposed to be a beautiful piece of buttery bread, studded with just little chunks of chocolate here and there. And not to overstate it, but this is one of the first things I remember eating that made me think about that area between sweet and savory, which is an area I love, and try to visit as often as possible. But anyway, that's it, chocolate croissants. So whether you're going to make these because you have some croissant dough in the freezer, or you're actually going to make a batch of dough from scratch, I really do hope you give these a try soon. So head over to foodwishes.com for all the ingredient amounts and more info as usual. And as always, enjoy.